Hey guys, how are you? I'm just about to make our new sneaker cake and I wanted to show you our disposable baking box for those of you who haven't seen it yet or haven't had a chance to use one. This is the disposable baking box here. It is pre-greased, burns at 220, so we put them in the oven at 160. I guess it's a bit like putting a rigid cupcake case in the oven. So when you bake your cake, you literally just pour the cake mix straight into it. You don't need to grease it or line it with baking paper. But what you want to do is when you finish baking your cake and it's completely cold, you want to run your knife around the edge of it like this. And that's just to catch any sprays and any parts that have caught to the edges. And then what you do is you can actually fold down the sides. So you don't have any of that thing of having to flip, try and flip a cake out and be worried that you're not going to get it out. So then the next thing you want to do is you want to run your knife under the bottom for the same purpose, and then that loosens the cake from the box, and it's absolute genius. So you can see from the box there's only just like a few little catches and things. You can actually wipe this box and use it again. In terms of then flattening your cake, you really only want to take the very dome off the top so it sits flat, because once you cut out most of the shapes, any kind of difference in height tends to go away as long as you have a landing ground. And if you have any little bits, then you find that the icing, when you ice the cake, just fills them in. So what I do is I like to use a flat bed knife. I put my hand in the middle and I take that first cut off the cake. This part is delicious, so all of my family always eat it for morning tea. And then I want to go in again and take smaller amounts off, to make sure that I'm getting it completely flat. So you can start with a slightly bigger bit, and then I just hold my knife super flat, as you can see, and it just allows you to catch any edges. And then what I like to do is I like to go down here and check that I've been holding my knife straight, and take any last bits off that I feel are not quite right. And then I'm flat. You can see I've still got those little curved edges. I didn't take it too far down, and I am good to go. One of the things I get asked about a lot is butter icing. How thick is too thick or too thin? When we're writing your recipe cards, a lot of the time you've been allowed to choose whatever color you like, and different colors can have a different impact on your butter icing. For example, if you're going to add cocoa powder to make brown, it's going to make your icing a bit drier. If you're going to try and make red, then you need much more food coloring than you would to add a tiny drop to make peach. And therefore, it's important that at the end you adjust your icing to suit. So we make the icing ingredients at the start on the recipe card thick, and then we ask you to color it and then to adjust the icing with a little bit of extra milk to get the right spreadable consistency. And so what you can see is you should be able to, it should still be thick and fluffy, but you should be able to easily mix it round. You shouldn't be pulling on it like this. You don't want it to pull on your cake, and that's how you need it a little bit softer. Also, if it's a cold day and maybe you've made your butter a little bit harder, it can also need a little bit more milk. It's really important that if you've forgotten to take your butter out of the fridge, that you beat the butter really heavily first to soften it up. If you put it in hard, then you'll end up with an icing that looks like breadcrumbs. You'll end up having to add a lot of milk to it in order to make it into icing, and then it will go sloppy because there's far too much milk in it. So having softened butter is really, really important. And if you forget to soften it, then cut it up into little squares and beat it heavily. Don't put it in the microwave, it breaks the structure. Just beat it really heavily. So let me show you how I ice the cake. First of all, what you're going to do is I like to take a really big lump of icing. It's maybe about half the icing, and I put it on top of the cake. If you get a few crumbs in the side of the cake, people won't see them. It's really, if you can get a nice smooth top on your cake where it doesn't have crumbs in the top, then what happens on the sides is not so bad. So what I like to do is I put a big lump in the middle, and then I just glide it towards the edges. And you can see that because I've put a great big lump in the middle, and because I'm now just pushing it, there's absolutely no chance of getting any crumbs in the top. You see how quick and easy that was? If your icing doesn't spread as fast as that, and you didn't watch the first part about the thickness of your icing, you need a bit more milk. So make sure that your icing is easily spreadable, and you're going to push it right the way towards the edges like I have with this one. And so as you can see, there's no crumbs in the top at all. Split it up. Okay, so now what I do for the sides is I like to take a big dollop of icing, I put it on the edge, and then I just smooth it along. So I've caught it from that top edge, because that top edge is where you might get crumbs. I've put it on the top of the cake and flopped it over. You can see I've used quite a lot, and I'm pushing it along. The most important thing is it should glide like this, and if it's not gliding like this, then you have your icing too thick. And there you have it. The other thing to remember is that you can move your cake board as you're doing it. You know, so instead, I'm obviously doing this to show you how to do it. So I've kind of got it, I would have had this towards myself. But you can move the cake board so that you can have it in front of you at all times. Again, putting it on the top and then sliding it round. If it's pulling back on your palette knife or your spatula, it's too thick. Okay, I've iced all my cake. I just have two more last tips for you. Once I finished icing my cake, you can often end up with a rough edge. So once the cake has set for maybe a couple of minutes, I like to go around just with my finger, or you can do it with your heel. And I just like to go around and take the roughness off the edge. If they're long sides, I'll do it with my whole hand. And it just gives you a smoother edge on your cake. And then the last thing I always do is clean the board. One of the things that really makes a massive difference on the way your finished cake looks is whether your board is clean and shiny and doesn't have loads of smears on it, or worse, lots of icing left over around the bottom. Also, when you're trying to put other pieces of fondant on, you can end up with all of that in the fondant. So I like to take a piece of kitchen towel and I just fold it over so I've got a corner. And then all I do is I go and I press with my thumb and I just drag it around the edge. And then when I get to the edge, I turn it over and I'll do another section of it. You can add water, but the problem I have with the water is that sometimes it makes the food coloring leak out of the icing. So some people like baby wipes, but I personally prefer just dry kitchen towel. And then what I do is I fold the whole thing over again, and at the end I just polish my board to make it nice and finished.